Hi everyone. It gives me great pleasure to do this talk on behalf of our team, in particular Esther Shackleton and Adam McLean, who have led this work around developing a chatbot for essentially translating a existing counselling program that's delivered by humans into an AI chatbot for supporting people who are pregnant in quitting smoking in their pregnancy. Um, in the UK at the moment, we've got roughly about 1 in 10 people who are pregnant in early pregnancy who smoke. And this is really socially patterned. So we've got people in the most deprived areas as being around 6 times more likely to smoke in pregnancy than those in the least deprived areas. The good news is that we do have an effective treatment option, which is called the Standard Treatment Programme. And this is interpersonal counselling, including the option of nicotine replacement therapy. And increasingly, more recently, most areas are now providing vapes as an alternative for those who wish to use it to quit. And for everyone who's pregnant, they get formally screened using a carbon monoxide breath test. And all those identified as smokers in maternity care are then automatically referred to receive stop smoking support. The one challenge with this is that even with that opt-out referral pathway, we're still not getting a huge proportion of people who smoke in pregnancy taking up the offer of support. Slightly older data suggests this is sort of up to about 20%. It may have increased more recently, but we're lacking good data on this. Some of the reasons why people who are pregnant might not take up traditional interpersonal support include the perceived stigma of smoking in pregnancy. There are a lot of negative views around stop smoking support and services offering that, and a lot of people do find the support being offered quite inflexible. There are also sort of practical barriers, time, childcare, transport, access, and so on, that do make it a little harder for them to engage in this. As we probably all know, digital support offers potential for getting around and circumventing these barriers, greater anonymity, more treatment flexibility, and additional treatment that isn't so easy to deliver by interpersonal means, and the ability to access support technically at any time. And so what our project, which is called the eSupport project, looks to do is to essentially convert the existing interpersonal counselling, and here's an image of a standard treatment program manual, which includes the provision of nicotine replacement therapy and vapes for those that want it, from an interpersonal support program to a digital program, which would include an app. And we're working with the Smoke-Free team to create a pregnancy version of that, which would also include the provision of NRT, and for those that, or for those that want it, a vape. So this is just to highlight that the standard treatment program has a very clear sort of protocolized form of treatment, including quite a lot of specific elements of support. And one of our early reflections when thinking about a chatbot and how it might be able to deliver this was that this is a lot to cover in one session. And quite quickly, we realized that we would need to break down the standard support into smaller micro sessions, as we've called them. And so I'll talk a bit more about that later. The standard treatment program, and follows on quite nicely from Osnat's presentation, is a multi-sessional support program, so that it's something that people will have additional sessions at quit date, and then various times after they pass their quit date and progress through their quit attempt. One of the things we did early on was to speak to experts about their views of translating human to sort of digital care. And I've just pulled out a few things we learned particularly that were particularly important around the chatbot. So a lot of people anticipated a rule-based or a fixed choice kind of chatbot when we spoke to them, and there was some concern that this might limit the ability of the support to really encompass people's views and experiences, which highlights a really important opportunity for generative AI to sort of close that gap. And interestingly, the experts, despite being quite positive about chatbots, still felt like in case the chatbot isn't able to address the request from the individual, they'd still need some kind of human escalation within the sort of intervention. We also spoke to people with experience of smoking and pregnancy, and they were also pretty positive about the concept of a chatbot and felt it would be good for anonymity and it not judging them. There was equally this kind of worry that maybe some of their requests might lack that human understanding in terms of the chatbot's response. And they also independently felt like an option to escalate to a human was going to be important under those circumstances where it wasn't able to really address their or understand their query. We're right in the middle of some co-design work at the moment, and we've completed the first stage of that, where we spoke to pregnant or postpartum people, experts, and our public involvement members. And our first stage work was really to understand their views on the key features, and a big component of this was looking at the chatbot itself. And we're going to do our second stage later on this month and into December. But I just wanted to pull out a couple of the key points here. So one of the key findings was that people really preferred a simple, in terms of the chatbot, simple language and concise and brief text. They liked the human icon over any of the sort of other kinds of avatars we were comparing with them. They wanted also to be able to track their progress through the different sessions that they would have with the chatbot. We spent a bit of time exploring whether people might like to be able to switch chatbot personalities, different personality kind of traits and characteristics. But generally, people had very similar views for their preferred kind of personality, and they didn't think it was really the priority for this. So we've kind of backed off on that approach. And the people with lived experience were also particularly keen for the chatbot to help them to learn about NRT and vapes and to make a decision on what products would be suitable for them. And so building in this a sort of module for supporting that selection is a very important part from their perspective. Okay, so what we've ended up with is looking to a chatbot that kind of combines a rule-based approach in some cases, but also the freedom of having a generative AI in combination. And we're using a Llama large language model for this. But as highlighted earlier, including human escalation for those people who really feel like the responses perhaps aren't kind of tapping into what they want, or they're not happy, or they want to ask a human something just to be sure. The chatbot itself would deliver a series of micro sessions which will cover the core components of this standard treatment program. It would all be tailored to pregnancy. It would include support of both deciding on which NRT or vape products to use and supporting the provision of that through the app. It would also be able to provide the sort of questions and answers as we've seen earlier in response to people's queries, and that to be generative and human-like, and all along the way to obtain information about the user that the chatbot will remember to ensure that future kind of interactions are tailored to them, and that should help to build rapport, or at least we're hoping it will. In terms of the generative chatbot side of things, we're using a pre-trained generative model, and it uses the RAG approach, which Lauren's mentioned earlier, also known as retrieval augmented generation. So basically what it is it's a database or a knowledge source where we put in, say, the standard treatment program guidance documents or other guidance documents, lists of key bits of information or advice on how to deliver support, and it may also, we're also planning for it to include good answers to common questions and what a good and a bad answer would be. We're currently running the prototype that Adam's developed in a relatively confined environment, so it's running a sort of a smaller model than you would if you were delivering this at scale. And on the right here, you've got a kind of schematic that represents the way in which it's delivered. I think a key thing here is that when people engage with it, and this essentially feeds into the large language models, that the sort of main brains behind it will generate three different responses to the query that's come in from the user. And then there's a large language model that picks which of those three is the best response and then delivers that in the tone of the personality that we've created for that particular chatbot. In terms of the microsessions, we're going to have fixed choice dominant microsessions, so they're mostly fixed choice options, but with a bit of generative and interaction there. It'll be around getting to know the user, advice on preparing for a quit attempt, and looking at product selection, which is a key part of this standard treatment program. And then there'll be generative conversational prompts and microsessions oriented around this. So for example, for people who are a bit unsure about their quit dates, helping them to make a better quit date, or are just unsure about quitting, so that we have some content for people who are not quite there yet and need a little bit of help to boost their motivation. There'll also be, as part of the sort of multi-sessional plan, various check-ins. This is to be fully decided, but we could map onto the existing standard treatment program time points there, and it would be checking up on people's products to make sure they don't need to change those, any upcoming challenges or issues, or anything that they want to discuss to give them some help with. Here's from our prototype chatbot. Here's an example of a conversation that combines fixed response with generative responses from the AI on the left. So you can see here on the right, you've got a user. They have a free text reply that there's a generative response to, and then a fixed response question, and then a free text reply, and then some more fixed response replies, and then the ability to have fixed responses from the user so that we can collect specific data. And you might recognize the question at the bottom there about the time of first smoking after waking as a way of collecting data as part of that getting to know you session. So it's been very challenging to combine that generative and that rule-based approach in one space, in one interaction. The app itself covers more things than the chatbot, and I'm not talking about this, but just to highlight that there is also other features, self-monitoring, there's engagement enhancers, push notifications and text messages, and other kinds of information oriented around quitting smoking and pregnancy. So it's sort of built, the chatbot is a main feature, but built within a shell of other bits of support that's nested in this smoke-free app. And then just finally, a couple of challenges that we've experienced with where we've got to so far. Chatbots are really complex, and as a team, certainly those of us that haven't had experience in this, getting to understand this has been quite a challenge. We've had to work very flexibly because we've had to change direction occasionally. We're somewhat limited by where we can go technically, so sometimes we've had to adapt how we're going to deliver support according to what is possible within the technical parameters. So for example, switching between rule-based and generative chatbot modes is quite challenging, so we're trying not to do too much of that. We also find that the sort of guidance around creating a sustainable and environmentally friendly chatbot is somewhat limited, so we're trying and struggling a bit with developing that within that kind of context. And then there are technical challenges, and these are primarily issues that Adam has explained to us. So there's the issue of misalignment between the foundational model, so the original pre-trained model, and then what we want the model to do. So for example, a pre-trained model doesn't like the idea of recommending nicotine replacement therapy use in pregnancy. That's not something that's done universally, but in the UK, it is part of standard treatment. So we've had to kind of essentially find ways of getting the chatbot to sort of ignore some of its pre-trained information, or at least to get in there with prompts and the RAG database to override it. But that's a challenge. There's generative constriction. So because we've ultimately going to have a smaller locally run model, because safety is really key, and with that sort of RAG and prompt approach, there's going to be less conversational flexibility. So it won't be as slick and as enjoyable to converse with as some of the bigger models. Equally, when you give the AI more to process, like prompts and the data from in the RAG database, that's going to increase the token count of the model, which will degrade the response speed. So there's always going to be a bit of a tussle between those two factors. So it's likely in the future that we'll end up with some model fine-tuning to help address some of these safety and knowledge gaps in the base model. And that does increase the challenge of developing this. So that's basically where we've got to. And just to highlight here in the yellow boxes, the next steps are to do some iterative optimization cohorts where we'll test this out in groups of people and then iterate and optimize in between different sequential cohorts. And then we've lucky to have a trial funded to evaluate this in an effectiveness study this app, but also to look at how we might get it used in real care and real practice through an implementation work stream. So I'm going to end there, but thanks very much for listening. And again, big thanks to the wider team for all their work on this.
Great, thanks, Felix. Yeah, interesting to hear that you have to train out some training that has gone in. Yeah. So we've got a couple of questions in the interest of time. Just so we have a question. I note that this version of the bot led in regard to the conversation. Is that right?
Yeah, so it would vary, but yes, essentially the bot will lead the sessions and will like a counselor would. So it would start the session and it would say, okay, this session's going to be about this, and then might ask a question to get some kind of interaction going, and it would work in this way. Yeah, so it would be bot led.
Okay. And quick question about personality type. So what was the general personality they wanted to engage with? Because it seems picking a personality type might be attractive to some users.
Yeah, this was an interesting one. We did anticipate that would be attractive. And basically what we did is we explored with people using ChatGPT and turning up and down different features like how funny it was and how assertive it was, how comforting. And we got people to rate where their ideal score would be. And everyone pretty much rated it the same, which is all mostly 3 out of 5. So there wasn't a huge amount of variation, and you could spend a lot of time facilitating changing the personality, but our reflection and feedback was that that probably wouldn't be a priority. Certainly for future versions to enhance engagement, then that might be something that we could go back to. But I think for the for the time being, we're just going to focus on trying to get the delivery of support right and that interaction between generative and free text.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Felix.